Guarantees may be required. Conditions apply. Ministry of Finance has no links to the government. Ho, ho, ho!
LBC 97.3. Call Clegg. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. 0845 6060 973. Text 84850. Tweet at LBC 973. This is Call Clegg on London's biggest conversation. LBC 97.3.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 5th of December, and that means it's time for Call Clegg with me, Nick Clegg, and of course Nick Ferrari, here on LBC 97.3. And I'm taking your questions for the next half an hour or so, so if you want to get in touch, call on 0845 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk. And you can also watch on the website, lbc.co.uk. So let's go straight to the first caller, and the first caller is Bob. Bob in Stamford Brook. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Nick. Good morning to you.
Morning.
First of all, if I may say so, I loved it yesterday on PMQs. Manana, manana. Brilliant.
One of many languages Mr. Clegg can speak, of course, I should point out, according to the papers. One of about five, so lucky that he did one we understand. You continue, Bob.
Morgan.
Yes, indeed.
It was a good one. Sir, what I would like to ask is, where are the police in central London? Well, I'm not saying about the UK. You know, the I hate to say Roma, but you know the people that were up and down Park Lane, behind Hyde Park, all in the park. You never see any police. Why do the police? They're not visible anymore. What has happened to the Met in London? I mean, this presumably is a coalition issue. You're pro-police, etc. But there aren't any. You hear sirens. You see all these blue and red cars charging about. But why do you leave all these people on the street?
Well, just before the Deputy Prime Minister's answer, I should tell you, as you've probably heard on this programme, Bob, and Mr. Clegg will comment in just a second, it is the desire or the aim of the current Commissioner, Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe, to take police out from behind the counters, out of police cars and put them on the streets. And he's got almost record numbers. He's got 30,000 plus personnel with which to do it. But let's hear now from Nick Clegg.
Well, I was about to say, Bob, you obviously don't feel it, and how people perceive these things is terrifically important, by the way, about how safe people feel. But the facts are, actually, just as Nick said, that even though the police are having to make unprecedented savings in their overall costs because of all of the the problems in the public finances, nonetheless there's been a big shift in actually getting people out onto the front line. And I can get you the headline numbers, but I was looking at them the other day. But actually there's been broadly speaking, a very successful shift of reducing resources in the back office and getting more people out into our communities. Now, I don't know, you maybe experienced something where you felt there wasn't a visible presence. And of course, you can't have a police officer standing on every single street corner. But I think by and large, the police have done a brilliant job at saving huge amounts of money and in a way they've never had to for a very long period of time. And nonetheless, making sure that the police presence is felt out and about on our streets and our communities.
Quick response from you, Bob.
If I may say so, I mean, yes, brilliant amount of money is one thing, but to actually see a copper on the street, the old bobbies. I live in a lovely part, West London, Chiswick Way, but when I work in the West End, zero. You get a few people shouting microphones, helping people cross the road at Selfridges or whatever, or Nigella gets 7 or 8.
Well,
but there aren't any police in central London, sir. That's all I've...
Yeah. All right, Bob, I'm grateful. We have challenged Scotland Yard why Nigella needed 7 police officers, and they said it has been reviewed, and they won't use 7 today. That was an extraordinary decision of personnel. I don't think we can necessarily blame the Deputy Prime Minister for that. Bob, thank you. Look, stay tuned. The Commissioner, I think we've got one phone in with him before Christmas, so Sir Bernard Hogan-Howe comes here to take your calls. Be sure to put your call. I think he's probably better placed to answer it. Deputy Prime Minister.
Is it Sema in Highbury?
Semha.
Hello, Semha.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
Okay, yeah, my question is with regards to the Italian lady who was forced to have a C-section.
Yeah.
I understand we don't know all the facts, and the newspapers have they tend to sensationalise a lot of things. But if I had to ask you one question with regard to that, is that if I was a pregnant woman or a woman with a bipolar or a mental condition, is that the sort of treatment that I could expect to receive? Because it seems that she got inadequate help. Because she did contact them herself to say she knew she had a problem. She got in touch with the health services or the police, and it doesn't seem that she received adequate help in this situation. And is that what we can all expect, basically?
Well, Sema, I like you, no doubt, just as a human being, and I'll come to in a minute to the policy and the law and stuff, but just have been you know, I mean, it's been quite an extraordinary and distressing thing to read about, that a woman says that she wants to keep her baby, but that she was, according to her, at least what I've read, that she was given this C-section without any warning. That Essex, I think it's Essex Social Services, have taken the baby into their care, and it's just the mind spins at the kind of distress that this must cause to any human being. As you say, the Essex Social Services, obviously, I've got another side of the story. My understanding is getting in touch with the Italian authorities, where, if I understand it correctly, the lady in question has had other children taken into care in the past, so there is a context there which we need to be aware of.
The
and of course,
existing daughters now live with grandma, so the other two girls now live with grandma.
So there is. How can I put it? There is context there. It doesn't make the facts of this case any more unsettling. And as you know, the president of the Family Courts Division has said this is such a sensitive issue. It raises such important legal precedents that he's actually said anything to do with this case now needs to be dealt with in the High Court, which is quite an unusual step. So look, a very unusual, very unsettling case.
How can we guarantee it would never happen again if we come back to the root of her question, Deputy Prime Minister?
Well,
how did it happen in the first place, really? And then could it happen again? Yeah.
Well, clearly, Essex Social Services have acted in a way which they think is, in the name of the safety of the child and in line with law. But I think it's why the president of the Family Courts Division has been right to say, look, this is such a big issue. It's an issue of huge public interest. It raises very, very profound moral issues and legal issues. This needs to be dealt with in the High Court. But look, I'm as unsettled and disturbed by this as anybody. I guess all I would say is, given that there is obviously a context about where this lady came from in Italy and the other children she's had have also been taken to care, there is, I guess, a wider context that you need to take into account. But I totally accept what you're saying, Simon, which is that this kind of thing is an extraordinary, you would hope, exceptional state of affairs, because having the state at any level basically decide that a mother will have a C-section and their child is no one can feel comfortable or relaxed about that kind of situation.
To those who say there's too much secrecy in the family court and the court of protection, how would you respond?
Oh well, I totally understand that, and to be fair, there's been steps to open up the family courts. Actually, Sir James Munby, the guy I was referring to earlier, the president of the Family Courts Division, he's now doing a review about how making it more open.
Would you support that, Mr. Clegg?
Oh, I think the greatest openness possible is always a good thing. All I would say, of course, is that these courts, and in this case the Court of Protection, are dealing with extraordinarily sensitive and difficult issues where I think sometimes anybody with any ounce of compassion would say that maybe some families and individuals, and indeed children,
powers too, Mr. Clegg.
Yes, extraordinary powers, and extraordinary powers need to be held to account. But also, we must always ask ourselves what is in the interests of the often vulnerable children and adults involved in these cases, and sometimes having the glare of publicity cast upon them immediately isn't necessarily always in their best interest. But I think more transparency. Sir James Munby is looking at this. Steps have been taken. More steps should be taken where that's appropriate.
There you go.
Andrew in Heston. Andrew.
Good morning, Nick.
Morning.
I work very hard every day. I go out and pay my taxes, and I pay for my child's lunch when he goes to school. Why do you think it's fair that I should also pay now for the lunch of other people's children?
Well, what's going to happen is the government is going to pay for your child's lunch and everybody's who is at the first few years at infant school. Look, the reason...
No. They're not going to pay for mine. He's not at infant school anymore. And you say the government, but it's me. I'm a taxpayer. You seem to be living in cloud cuckoo land. When you say the government's paying for this, or the government's paying for that, or the government's paying for these green initiatives, or the government's paying for whatever, it's me, Nick. I'm a taxpayer.
Everybody is, Andrew, and what we do in our country, and indeed in all civilised societies, we decide there are certain things that we all pool money together from our taxes to give people certain forms of support and assistance. And I think not only myself, but many people feel that the evidence is overwhelming that if you give kids at the moment... But remember, by the way, I've heard some of these criticisms, particularly from people on the right, saying, it's a complete waste of money to give money to people who don't need it. 4 out of 10 children in poverty do not receive free school meals today. They are the children which will benefit the most if we give those young children in those first precious years at school the ability to have a healthy hot meal at lunchtime, to sit down and have lunch together. And the places where this has been piloted, in places like Newham here in London and in Durham in the north of the country, have shown that not only it has health benefits, it also closes the attainment gap between bright but poor kids and less bright but wealthier kids. It also saves families who are shelling out over £400 a year to pay for those lunch costs for their children.
What about the lunch costs of my child?
Well,
it's not in Key Stage 1 anymore. Well, what about my child? I just feel as though you and your sort just want to bleed me dry for all these... And I don't doubt they're good causes, Nick. My heart's with you.
But Andrew, say that to someone who is really struggling to pay, let's say, £900 if they've got 2 children at infant school at the moment. Someone on a low income where their children don't... No, but hang on, Andrew. You're making...
Let Mr. Clegg... £16,000 now.
Andrew, I will bring you back in. I've just got to let Mr. Clegg. He will come back. Mr. Clegg.
Andrew, you're making quite a sort of pungent allegation that somehow this is not going to help parents and families who need help. There are thousands upon thousands of parents who are really hard-pressed, who are having to pay £900 a year, which is what they have to do if they have 2 children at infant school, and there are many families in that category who don't receive free school meals. If you're basically saying to them, Andrew, that I as a politician should turn around and say, no, we don't care about your plight, and we're not going to try and help you with those lunchtime costs, well, you're free to make that argument. It's not one that I believe in. And by the way, today...
You're putting words in my mouth.
What?
I'm not saying that at all. If that's the case, raise the threshold for free school meals from £16,000 joint income. If that's the case, I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay for the meals of children who can't afford to eat. I'm not saying that at all. Have the sensible policy and raise the threshold for free school meals.
But what we let me read out. There's a guy called John Vincent. You know those Leon restaurants.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Leon,
So
Leon chain of restaurants.
he did a review for the Department for Education. About this whole issue, about school meals and so on. And he said, and I'll just read out very quickly, if I may, Andrew, what he said. He said, look, we spent a year analysing food in schools from every angle. Free school meals for all children, in this case in infants classes, benefits all children and especially the poorest children. Children will do better at school, be healthier, and the taxpayer will spend less on fixing diabetes and other diseases caused by bad diet. So, look, you seem to sort of think it's at some sort of politician's whim, Andrew, to do this. We've had people look at this very carefully, in this case John Vincent, over a year. There are educational benefits because it closes that so-called attainment gap that opens up very, very early on in our school system. It saves people money.
That?
Well, because in the places where we've piloted this, Newham is one place, Durham is another, it's actually shown that by having a healthy hot meal every lunchtime, children concentrate better in the afternoon, and it particularly helps those children from lower income families who presently don't get a free school meal. So I think there are health reasons, there are cost of living reasons, and there are educational reasons why this is a great thing to do. I understand it is controversial with some people, but I passionately believe that in the years to come, this will be a very, very big progressive change that most families across the country will welcome.
Final point from you, Andrew.
Then make it applicable to Key Stage 2 as well. It's just...
Oh, no, sure, that's a different matter, Andrew.
It seems as though this is a kind of half-baked policy, and it's... You seem to think that, I don't earn that much money and I've got to pay for my son's school meals.
I get from the Deputy Prime Minister he'd love to make it available for all children, but it's...
I would love to make it available for all children.
On the subject, thank you, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. I look forward to speaking with you again. So on the subject of cost, it's reported today this scheme, Deputy Prime Minister, will cost taxpayers an extra £150 million than was first expected. Where's that cash come from? So
the £150 million is for a very specific thing, which is that there are some schools which don't have kitchens which are properly equipped or large enough to provide those free school meals to everybody. So clearly there's no point having this policy if you don't give the schools the money to improve their kitchens. We estimate that'll cost about £150 million. We've been in touch with the local authorities and others.
So where's that money come from?
Well, that's £80 million of it is coming from the Treasury, and £70 million is coming from an underspend on maintenance and the maintenance budget of the Department for Education.
And yet it's reported in the paper, but these are only sources. One paper, there was no underspend. This money was allocated to build new schools. There will now be a shortage of pupil places as a result of extra spending. It says a source, I hasten to add.
Look, this is complete nonsense. Clearly, I mean, look, I don't read all this sort of...
Factually incorrect.
It's factually entirely incorrect.
Okay.
The Chancellor and myself have agreed and hammered out, and I don't want to sound too grand about this, but I think when the Chancellor and the Deputy Prime Minister agree on something, it's something which will happen across government, whatever some unnamed source says in a particular department, that we need this £150 million to provide schools with the kitchens they need to provide these free school meals to all infant school children. £80 million of it comes from the Treasury, from general expenditure, £70 million from this underspend on the maintenance budget, not on basic need, because that would be wrong to take the money away from the basic needs of other schools.
And here's the thing I don't understand, and we must move on to another caller. So I'm going to, through my taxes, subsidise Wayne Rooney's children when they go to school, a man who makes nearly £200,000 a week, and I'm going to buy his child's school lunch.
No, but listen, you can, in a sense,
Seems strange.
Well, yes, your taxes pay for Wayne Rooney's child to be treated in the NHS. Your taxes pay for Wayne Rooney's pension, state pension. At some level in society, we agree, don't we, all of us, that the common pot in which we put our taxes can provide, in some cases, a universal benefit to everybody.
Millionaires' children.
Well, look, if you want, we can say that millionaires are not allowed to step foot in an NHS hospital. If you want, we can say that they can never receive a state pension. We decide as a society there are certain things that everybody is eligible to. By the way, not least because the administrative cost of excluding actually a rather comparatively small number of people from those benefits would far outweigh the satisfaction of having done so. What the evidence shows is actually the children that benefit the most are these 4 out of 10 children who live in poverty but presently don't get free school meals. And I would suggest they are more important in all of this, and their parents who'll be saved over £400 a year are more important than this, than whether Wayne Rooney's children benefit or not.
We can't really have you in the studio without reflecting on the tragic events up in Glasgow at the end of last week, and obviously we all saw you attend there earlier in the week and I think lay some flowers. What did you take from your meeting with various officials up there? How much can you tell us about what is known and what took place at that bar in Glasgow, Deputy Prime Minister?
I can't tell you very much about what took place in that terrible, fateful night on last Friday, because the investigators need to do their work in looking at the helicopter and its wreckage and so on. What I can tell you is I've started to have been to Glasgow several times over the last few months, and it is such a warm, compassionate city. It has its problems. It's had its history of divisions. But in a moment like this, I can't really think of a city which would react with such universal compassion as people did. There was a real sense that everyone was very united in grief, but they're also united in enormous kind of compassion towards each other. And just this extraordinary tales of people not running away from danger, which is what you could almost expect many people would do if you've seen a helicopter crash into a building, but running towards danger to help their fellow Glaswegians. And I found that will remain with me for a long time. It was a city which has really come together and shown an extraordinarily powerful sort of spirit of compassion.
We move to other calls.
Graham in Croydon. Hello, Graham.
Yes. Oh, hello, Nick. Yes.
Hi.
Has the concept of retirement been abandoned?
This comes as it's reported. I think a young girl born today is going to work until she's about 72, isn't it, or 75, before she retires, if we hear Mr. Osborne's statement correctly, Mr. Clegg.
Graham, no, of course retirement has not been. In fact, what we're seeking to do is keep the principle that around a third of your adult life is in retirement, and that's, in very rough terms, been the kind of rule of thumb for quite a long period of time now, that you work for a certain number of years, but then a third of that total period of time that you're working is actually spent in retirement. And of course, if that's your rule of thumb, if that sense of entitlement that around a third of your adult life is spent in retirement is to be retained, then of course it needs to keep up with the fact that people are living longer and longer and longer. And that, of course, clearly means that the point at which you retire shifts. And that's what the Chancellor is confirming in the autumn statement today, or rather has confirmed in reports overnight. It's part, and I'm not pretending it's an easy concept to accept, but it's part of what happens as societies become more affluent, and as people become healthier and live much, much longer, we need to make sure that the rules on retirement, which were first set decades ago, keep up with those demographic changes.
Graham?
Yes, you say as society becomes more affluent and people live longer, that's just because since the Second World War, society has become more affluent and there have been improvements in the medical service, but we're now going through a period of extended austerity. It's quite possible that living standards and care for people will go down. People will have less money. And there is also an obesity epidemic. So it's quite possible that life expectancy will peak, it will plateau, and then come down. So people in the future may live less long. So I understand what you're saying about life expectancy increasing, and therefore there is a need to find a way of funding retirement. But if life expectancy starts to come down, will the government in the future, well, we can't predict, but in the future, will that be taken into account, and the retirement age, the qualifying age for the pension be brought back down?
Good point, Graham, and that's why the whole way these decisions are going to be taken, as George Osborne will confirm in an hour or two, is that this is going to be subject to a periodic review, independent of politicians, precisely trying to provide the best estimates of what you're talking about, which is lifespan and the effect of general variations in well-being on how long we're expected to live, and so any decision will be taken in view of the best estimates of life expectancy, and that's what these periodic reviews will now do from now on.
Can I just pause? I get some questions. I've got some questions coming in via text, email and tweet, Deputy Prime Minister. Tom in Sutton. Hi, Nick. Tom Daly coming out has been dominating the news a lot this week. Do you, Nick Clegg, actually think it's newsworthy? If I'm being honest, writes Tom, I don't care either way. Do you?
No, but I think it's great. I'm like you. I'm very relaxed and about people's sexuality, and I want everyone else to feel kind of relaxed about this. In a way, I wish that in many years to come, maybe sooner, even better, the fact that a well-known sports personality comes out and says something about their sexuality is considered to be relatively unexceptional.
Simon in Canning Town, with Nigella admitting to taking cocaine and cannabis in the past, do you think we need another debate about legalisation? Have you ever taken drugs in your past? Asks Simon.
I don't think you can set policy by having one individual after the other sort of unburdening their souls about this. Of course, the case Nigella Lawson is subject to a court proceeding, so I'm certainly not going to seek to provide a running commentary.
Drug use,
but I'm not going to provide a running commentary on that. On drugs policy generally, I have always believed that there's been a tendency in government and in Whitehall to slightly stick our head in the sand and say, "Oh, we're winning the war on drugs." We're not, frankly. There's some good successes, and there's been some great steps forward. But if you look at the sophistication of the criminal world which peddles these drugs, if you look at the new, the chemically confected, highs and legal highs which come onto the market, if you look at the number of children who get hooked on stuff, I just think we should always be led by the evidence, and that's why I've asked Jeremy Brown and now Norman Baker, and he's completing the work that Jeremy Brown started, to go around to some other countries which have been doing innovative things to see whether they can tell us a thing or two about how we could, for instance, deal with some forms of the drug problem as a health problem rather than just a criminal justice problem, because often it is actually a health problem, getting people off these drugs so that they get out of the hands of the vile people who peddle these illegal drugs to them in the first place.
So if we're not winning, we're losing the war on drugs.
Well, look, I think, as I say, we're making some progress, and I don't want to dismiss everything that this government. Oh, I don't. Look, I think if you look at the sheer scale and sophistication and financial might of the illegal drugs industry, the idea that we should be complacent about what we're doing, I think, is a dangerous one. We should always look at the evidence. We should be humble enough to look at other countries and do innovative things, even where that may be sometimes controversial amongst people who just want to keep the status quo.
So decriminalise potentially.
No, funny enough, I don't think legalisation is a magic wand answer.
You don't, right.
I think, for instance, treating a lot of these problems as health issues rather than just as policing issues, and I speak to many people in the police who agree with that, might do more to help us win this war on drugs than many other measures.
And I've got to read the last part of Simon's question. Have you ever taken drugs in your past?
I'm simply not going to provide a running commentary about my past, because I'm not here to I'm not here to either present myself as a paragon of
But if I said you
virtues.
had, how would you respond?
So I'm just simply not going to.
I said I take from your answer that my inclination is that perhaps you, as a young man moving in that sort of set, if someone passes you a joint.
Certainly never, ever mixed, of course, my time in politics with. But I'm not going to get into, whether I did things right or wrong in my deep dark past before I went into politics.
Okay. By the way, when are you going to retire?
When am I going to retire?
Yeah, because we've just been talking about other people. Are
someone in mid-40s. It'll be late 60s, won't it?
You'll get there, will you?
What? At this rate, I sometimes ask myself whether I will.
Let's go back to the questions.
Dinesh in St Albans.
Oh, hi. Good morning, Nick.
Morning.
Morning. This is about an unfair admission criteria in the Department of Education's admission code for faith schools.
Right.
So there is a provision saying that if the school is oversubscribed by that particular faith, then you don't have to give any places for the non-faiths. My concern is these schools are 100% taxpayer funded, and to say that you exclude other faiths based on just religion and you're not allocating a certain percentage, say 10 or 20%, it's a bit unfair. We just live across the road of a faith school and we can't get in there.
Well, as you know, faith schools supported by the taxpayer, by the state, have existed in this country, and there are thousands of them that are highly, highly successful, and they are allowed to use an allegiance to faith as one of the bases upon which. What they're not allowed to do is, of course, select on the basis of ability and aptitude, but they have been, and that's been the case for a long period of time. Because in a sense, it's what it says on the tin. They are faith schools, and so they have to be non-selective as far as academic ability is concerned. But they're allowed to use faith as a criteria by which applications are made. And as you say, if they're undersubscribed, then of course that doesn't apply in the same way. But if they're very popular faith schools, then I suspect then it does not arise. And by the sounds of it, Dinesh, that is the case in the school. In your street.
Quick response from you, Dinesh.
As I said, my concern is this exclusion based on religion, and we actually promote integration within religion, within society. So this is actually contrary to that point, and faith school being contributing to the education system historically, I agree with that. But exclusion, I can't.
I'll tell you where I agree with you, Dinesh. And I actually think the vast majority of good faith schools that I know of do this. Is that they make considerable efforts to make sure that whilst the people who go to the school may be of a particular faith, they learn about other faiths, they reach out to other faiths. In fact, I often find that faith schools have a particular interest in other faiths just because they have a faith themselves. And I think that's very important, because otherwise, as you rightly say, you don't want faith schools, and I don't think anyone in the faith school movement wants to be perceived as this, to become sort of silos of segregation. They should also, of course, play their role in being forces of integration in society. And I think faith schools, by and large, do that.
All right. Thanks for that, Dinesh. More calls, if you would, Mr.
Jamie in Bromley. Hello, Jamie.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Clegg.
Hello.
Hi, guys. Look, I'm watching you on telly as well as speaking to you on the phone.
Very good.
Smile at the camera.
You can give us a wave, yeah. My question to you, Mr. Clegg, is I'm self-employed.
Mm-hmm.
I have a family. I have a mortgage. And I work in the courier network.
Yeah.
My employers have just said to me that due to increasing people from the European Union, mainly from Eastern Europe, that my contract may come to an end because I cannot do it as cheap as what they can do with their labour. And so, therefore, it might put me out of a job. And I just wondered what you think I should do. The second part to the question is, if these people are coming into our country and earning money in the self-employed market, what procedures are in place to make sure they're paying their taxes in this country rather than banking the money and in 2 years' time going back to their original country and the Inland Revenue never having to have resources to chase them up?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, first thing I'd say, Jamie, is if there anyone here who's got work and works as either self-employed or they're employed by somebody else, have got to abide by the rules and pay their taxes and pay their fair share. And the tax authorities, HMRC, and so on, their job is to make sure that is the case. The second thing, as you know, is that we have just last week announced that we're tightening up the. I know this is not quite relevant to your case, but it's nonetheless, I think, important more generally, is that the right to move to this country in exactly the same way that we have the right to move to other European countries to seek work is not the same as a right to claim. And so we're actually tightening up quite considerably the ability for people to come here if they haven't got work and claim benefits instead. And I think that is an important distinction. Yes, let's protect the right to move across the European Union to look for work. And let's remember there are around 2 million Brits who live and work elsewhere in the European Union. But that shouldn't be synonymous with, that shouldn't be the same as just having an automatic right to claim, no questions asked. Beyond that, Jamie, I mean, in terms of competition from people offering to do things at lower cost, I mean, without knowing more details, Jamie, about exactly who you work for and what they've got in mind, it is a constant thing, of course, that we're trying to do things for lower cost because we want to pass on lower cost to consumers. But we got to make sure that the competition is fair and that people play by the same tax rules, which they must.
And when the Romanian Labour Minister said that in many cases it's a very good job that young Romanians and Bulgarians come to this country because young Britons, I'm paraphrasing, but essentially are work shy and idle and they don't do jobs in agriculture and hospitality, how did you respond?
Well, I just, in the same way that I don't think we should sort of tar everybody with the same brush from other countries, I certainly don't think other people in other countries should tar everybody in this country with the same.
So she's not right when she says
well, of course she's not. Of course she's not. I mean, lots and lots of youngsters who have got a huge amount of get up and go, want to work really hard, are really dedicated to what they do. They don't want to be called workshop. There so happen to be certain sectors where we know, particularly seasonal agricultural work, where there's just been quite a long tradition of workers from other European...
But are there some young Brits who are lazy?
I think to make great generalisations,
I didn't say generalisation.
Well, you are.
I said some. No, the word some was
as I say, the vast... Actually, I've always been impressed, quite the reverse. I've not been struck by people who don't want to do a hard day's work. I'm on the whole, though no doubt some of those do exist, on the whole, been incredibly impressed by the willingness of young people to really pull out the stops to try and find work, and how incredibly demoralising it is for many youngsters to be sending out hundreds of job applications. They often don't get any answers. They don't get any explanation about why they didn't get an interview. And one of the things you'll hear about in the autumn statement today is some very significant new measures that we're taking as a government to make it easier for young people to get into work.
And lastly, a question from me on the subject of the autumn statement, and of course George Osborne. Have you met Lola?
I have not. This is the fluffy... What's
Bichon
it called?
Frisé, I think.
The what?
Bichon Frisé, is that? Or Bichon Frise?
Fantastic pronunciation.
I don't know the dog.
Neither do I. But,
have you met Lola?
I have not met Lola, but I look
presumably you've met the cat.
I met the cat, yeah, or the cats. Yes, I can't quite distinguish between one and the other.
Now, the cat's meant to be quite feisty, so who's going to rule the roost?
Every time I've seen a cat in Downing Street, it's usually fast asleep somewhere, so I haven't seen this feistiness yet. But if there is a gunfight at the OK Corral between this Bichon Frisé and the dozy cat, then I look forward to getting a ringside seat.
As long as everyone survives. And we're there again. Thank you, Deputy
Thank you very much.
Clegg. You've been listening to Call Clegg here on LBC 97.3, where the news is next.
Speaking to LBC 97.3, Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg has been defending